Hi, everyone,
Hello, everybody.
and welcome back to another episode of our Pretty Guilty podcast.
We are glad you're here because we have a lot to unpack today.
Absolutely. We're talking all things Karen Reed in this second retrial. We're on day 13.
Well, we finished day 13, so then Monday will be day 14, right? Where Buchanan is back on the stand, third day in a row.
Third day.
One full day of cross
Yeah.
with Alan Jackson.
It's probably my favorite part of the trial thus far, which we're going to get to.
Right.
But we're going to start off talking about the Nagels because these are the key witnesses. These are the people who were essentially outside of the residence around the time that Karen allegedly hit John O'Keefe with her car. And they're changing their testimony.
Well, Ryan Nagel actually, when he gets up to testify, so he wasn't there at the home prior to, and he wasn't necessarily out with them with John O'Keefe, Karen Reed, the Alberts, the night prior when they were at McCarthy's and Waterfall. He was actually out, I believe, with his ex-girlfriend, Heather Maxim's family, correct? I think they went out to dinner. They all had some drinks. His sister, Julie, was at the Albert home. Did you get the impression when he talks about his sister, Julie, that he kind of thought that she was a little bit of a brat?
See, this is the thing is if my sister Julie called me to come pick her up and I came and I picked her up and then she walked out of the house and said, I know you came all the way here in the snow, but I'm actually going to stay. And then now I'm wrangled into a murder trial. I'd be pissed too.
Well, I'd be really upset. Not to mention, she did invite them in the house, though. She said, "Hey, why don't you guys come in?" Heather said, "No, I don't think so. I want to go home."
It's kind of like Carrie Roberts. Like, I really had nothing to do with this, and now I'm in the middle of it.
Here's the thing about Carrie Roberts. We know that she testified, and I mean, there's so many things to get into, so much testimony to talk about. And one of the things about Carrie Roberts is when she got that phone call at 5 a.m., she was not out with them the night before. And I really think up to that point, she was just sort of drug into this. The problem is then she became really close with Jen McCabe. And they became friends. And then after that, you could see where the shift was.
Right.
Yes. So
she didn't start off so corrupt. I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but she didn't start off so
corrupt.
Yeah, that's the word I'm going to use.
It feels like that. I guess, again, we are looking at evidence. We're in the trial. So we're looking at evidence. And if we were a juror, this is our perspective off of what has been presented thus far. So this no longer now really kind of becomes an opinion. It's now based off of the witness testimony, evidence that's being submitted, the destruction of the Commonwealth's case. It really is falling downhill every single day that we watch this trial.
The Commonwealth case is crippling. Sorry, the cat distracted me. The Commonwealth case is crumbling every single day. It's just getting worse and worse. And then in this new trial, we're getting new perspectives. We're getting new information. People are changing their testimonies to an extent. It's not looking good for the Commonwealth. And then we have, which we're going to talk about later, we have Sergeant Buchanan on the stand, which is
watching it live, it was sort of, what is he saying? What is he talking about?
You have Jen McCabe, who's difficult on the stand, who's making it kind of a mockery of this case. And then you have someone like Sergeant Buchanan. Again, I feel like anytime a Commonwealth's witness has been called onto the stand, they're being so difficult, they're being combative, they're making a mockery of what is John O'Keefe's death and
on
justice.
Cross-examination, that's where we're seeing that combativeness.
Absolutely. And it's you see them on the Commonwealth side when they're being, you see on the Commonwealth side when they're on the stand and they're just very calm, whatever. But then you see the witnesses when they're on direct examination with the Commonwealth and they're not so combative, they're more cooperative, right? You see these witnesses when the Commonwealth is direct examining them and they're not so combative, they're not argumentative, they answer the questions. And then you see the defense get up there and do cross-examination and they're just so difficult on the stand. And to me as a juror, I would think at a certain point, why is it that they're all of the Commonwealth's witnesses are being so combative and just...
Here's the thing too, we have to remember when you're looking at a retrial and they're going through this testimony. So the first time they testify, a lot of them have testified in the grand jury, right? And then they have additional testimony that they have completed. Then you have the first trial. Now you have Miss Dally.
Yeah,
Now,
Miss Dally.
I know, now you have this cat. Oh, stop. No, I was kidding. She's sweet. But now you actually have a retrial. And so every testimony that they do is now utilized against them. And I don't think they thought it was going to go this far. That's my perception of these testimonies.
100%.
I really think that the law enforcement, whether it was Canton PD, whether it was the Massachusetts State Police, I really believe that they thought they were going to get this one and done covered up. They were going to do a
Absolutely.
trial. People want to believe the police. They want to believe that they're honest, that this would not be a cover up. Thus far, the evidence proves that this looks more like a cover up, that Karen Reed was framed.
And even if, say, Karen Reed did do it, why is this department so shady?
You know, that's the problem I have with all of this, is that if Karen Reed is guilty and she actually did do it, my problem still with it, and I think that we've talked about this previously, we've said it all along, is that this is your fellow brother in blue and you have done nothing to really protect him. They barely reference his name. He's always
Jen McCabe can barely say his name without cringing.
right. He's always the unidentified male. And at no time did anybody say that they wanted to just do everything they could to find the person responsible for this. But when Jen McCabe, she has never said that this is my friend and I'm so sorry that I didn't see him on the lawn.
The remorse from Jen McCabe when she's on the stand. You don't hear her say, I just want justice. I feel so terribly that this happened. I can't believe I found him on the lawn. You don't even understand what I've been through trying to process seeing my friend that way. Just none of that.
None of it.
There's just no empathy for the victim. And then you have Jen McCabe, and she's changing her testimony too. In a sense, in grand jury, she never said Karen Reed said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And that was something new that we learned, is that in the grand jury testimony that she did, she never mentioned it. This was just a new development that happened in trial one.
Right. Her testimony by far was the first real combative one that we saw.
It shows corruption in the department, certainly.
Yeah, so let's just finish with Ryan Nagel because I think his testimony was very important overall. It was short, but sometimes less is more, right?
Absolutely.
I feel like with his testimony, that's how it was. So Ryan Nagel he's a passenger in the vehicle. His girlfriend at the time, Heather Maxim, was in the back seat of this Ford F-150. They were on their way to the Albert home to pick up Julie Nagel, his sister. And they saw Karen Reed and John O'Keefe driving to the Albert residence. So they were kind of arriving at the same time as they were turning onto Fairview. He was making a left. Karen Reed was making a right. He signaled, go ahead and go. They entered to Fairview. So Ryan Nagel in this pickup, they were behind Karen Reed. Karen Reed parked in front of the Albert home. Ryan and his friend and girlfriend parked behind in front of the home and let Julie know that they had arrived.
So in Ryan Nagel's first testimony, in the first trial, how does it differ from the second one?
You know, I don't know that his testimony really necessarily differed from the first trial too much. I think what was critical in his testimony for the retrial was the fact that once again we're reminded that there was somebody that was behind her vehicle parked. Julie Nagel came out. She ran out to the vehicle. She spoke with them and she's like, hey, do you want to come inside? They said, no, we want to leave. So she was like, fine, I'm going to go back inside. During this interaction, Ryan Nagel says that he didn't see anybody enter the home or exit the home other than his sister Julie. On cross-examination, it was asked of him, but I mean, really, how much were they paying attention? They were drunk. They had been driving. So they were at the house not fully coherent. And Heather Maxim, on her testimony, they had asked her if she was of clear mind, and she said no, because they had been drinking.
Well, the important part, one of the most important part of Ryan Nagel's testimonies was the timeline, because he's saying that he's in front of the Albert's residence when they're saying that John was already dead.
So that's where he messed up in this trial. That's where it changed the story of the timeline. And that's where, when I saw that, I went, ugh, because
it was, and that's when it's the change in his testimony from the first trial, because the timeline.
Yes.
You're saying that the coroner is saying that John O'Keefe died at 12:32.
He was right, like 12:30. The last time his phone clicked off was like 12:31 and some
Yeah.
seconds, and then 12:32, I believe, was
Around
essentially
that.
the time of death.
And Ryan Nagel is saying he was at the home at
Between He said he was there for, originally, this is where his testimony did change. He said he was there for several minutes, like 2 minutes approximately. Then on cross-examination, they really pressed him on it, got out of him that it was closer to probably 5 minutes because that was his prior testimony, and then said he was there and he left some time. He was there for about 5 minutes between 12:30 and 12:35 a.m. That's a 5-minute window that he said that he was there.
And let's remember, Karen Reed's phone connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi at his home at 12:36.
Correct.
So they're saying that Ryan Nagel was outside the home at the same time that allegedly John O'Keefe was laying dead in the snow, but he's saying he was like
Right.
it just
The hard part is then we can look at the Commonwealth side of it, because also Ryan and Heather both testified that when they left, Karen Reed's vehicle was still there,
right.
and that when they did drive away, they saw the dome light on in her car, in the SUV, and that they didn't see anybody in the passenger side. They both confirmed that they saw her there, but then, of course, the Commonwealth is like, "Well, is it possible somebody else could have been in the car?" And they said, "Well," Ryan said, "Yes." Heather was more matter of fact, like, "No, I didn't see anybody in the car." They're trying to allude that Karen was blocking the view, but on cross, they were questioned, "You didn't see a 6'1" man sitting in the vehicle of Karen Reed's car with the dome light on."
Which it corroborates what Karen is saying when
Right.
she's saying, I was sitting in the car waiting for John to come back. And so Ryan Nagel is saying, I didn't see anybody in the car and I didn't see anybody enter or exit the house besides Julie Nagel. So then where was John O'Keefe? If he didn't enter the home, then he would have been
Right.
in the vehicle. But you have two witnesses who said they never saw John O'Keefe in the vehicle.
And the interesting part is Ryan Nagel is very matter of fact that she was sitting in the car, head forward, hands on 10 and 2 in the steering wheel, which that's an indication of a demeanor of somebody who's a little bit agitated, irritated, like, I'm waiting for him to come. She's like gripping the steering wheel.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, clearly she wasn't gripping the steering wheel to run into him like reverse wise, because then they would have seen
Reverse
John
lights.
O'Keefe. Yeah.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
And
They would have
reverse
seen him.
lights.
Yeah. They've seen a man and reverse headlights or tail lights.
Yeah. Headlights.
I
Wow.
know.
Imagine reverse headlights. It's crazy.
I know, we've got a new concept here. Those testimonies I actually think were very helpful in the
Important.
sense of, okay, so again, it messes the timeline up and it doesn't keep the flow of what the Commonwealth is trying to prove in my eyes.
Well, the Commonwealth is trying to say that nobody saw Karen hit him, that it was just these two outside. Karen saying she wasn't there. And you have a very conflicting testimony from these witnesses where they're saying they saw Karen and she was still there when they left. However, their timeline says that Karen was at John O'Keefe's house at, 1 minute. So it's a jumble of a little bit of a mess. However, all it's doing is creating reasonable doubt. Truly.
And here's the thing too, is some people I've seen talk about, well, it's only just a couple minutes. So if he's saying 2 to 3 minutes the first time and now he's saying 5 minutes, but I'm like, do you understand how precise this timeline, the importance of the timeline in this particular
Absolutely.
case? Minutes, seconds make a difference. So their testimony has to be spot on. And if it's
Absolutely.
not, it does create, in my opinion, some doubt.
Well, and now we have interviews that were done. We have a grand jury testimony. We have a first trial. And now this is a second trial. So if there was any time to be meticulous about numbers, this is like the fourth or fifth time that you've told this story. You should know the numbers.
And you could tell Ryan, especially, interestingly enough, when Heather testified, she was very smiley, very friendly. She does not want to be involved. She does not want to be there. Probably the most honest testimony, in my opinion, at this point. It's very short. She doesn't want to be there. She just happened to be there by circumstance and was like, get me on the stand, get me off the stand. Very polite. She's also the ex girlfriend. So she really wants probably nothing to do with these
Yeah.
people.
And especially with the heat that anybody who's going
Yeah.
against Karen Reed is getting. I mean, either way, really, if you're on either side in this trial, you're going to get heat from one side or the other. So being associated with this trial, I can't imagine is fun for anybody, regardless of if you play a small or big role. Okay, so the next Commonwealth witness that we want to talk about and the direction we want to head into is law enforcement, because every time they're on the stand, it's a journey. So we're talking about
Lieutenant Paul Gallagher.
yeah.
He is a retired Kenton lieutenant police officer, and his testimony is really where we see so many of the problems and the fractures. I mean, the first responders were already kind of troublesome because, we have a lot of them testifying of, Katie McLaughlin from the EMT, she say that she also heard Karen say, I hit him, but that didn't come out until later. So everything that
Mhm.
happened seems to be coming out days later, weeks later, months later.
Well,
And
and
so,
not to mention with the I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. We have the dash cam video where we can hear her saying so many things, and it's picking up so much audio. And never in any of that video or that audio is she saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. But every Commonwealth witness that's called is like, yeah, I heard 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times she said it.
right.
And it's increasing. The more witnesses, the more it's going from I hit him to I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Now it's 4 I hit hims, and it's never on video. It's never on the dash cam. But so many people allege that they said that she said these words. But again, it didn't happen in any of the interviews. It didn't happen
Well,
in the grand jury testimony.
even that EMT, Katie McLaughlin, she said she didn't take notes. And then she said, oh, then the defense pointed out she was looking down. It looked like she was taking notes on her glove, confirmed she was taking notes on her glove. I was like, did you ever put down on there that she said that she hit him? She said, no, I didn't. It wasn't my job to get further information once I heard that. I was like, certainly it is your job because
Certainly.
you're at a scene where there is a man who's laying here and either dying or
Mhm.
dead upon arrival. Why is this not your job? And then what does she do with the glove? She threw it away. And I'm like, what are these people doing? So
Yeah.
Lieutenant Gallagher ends up going to the scene on 34 Fairview, gets called out early in the morning after, John O'Keefe is found. He arrives, but before he leaves, of course, he drives his personal vehicle there because he said it was bigger. It was easier for him to get there with the weather. And before he leaves his house, he's like, I'm going to grab a tent because we have a body and we may have to cover it up from the weather. So let me get my personal tent from my garage, my attic. I don't know. Let me just throw it in my SUV in the vehicle. He goes by Canton Police Department. He grabs materials, but guess what he doesn't grab while he's there? Evidence bags, things to put evidence into.
And where did the solo cups that they put the DNA in, where did they get those from?
They got those from a Canton police officer's house who lives across the street from 34 Fairview, like across the street, but
To
maybe
an
kind of a house, like catty corner kind
over.
of.
Yeah. Which
Nonetheless,
also had cameras that
he
allegedly had nothing on camera.
right. Well, here's the problem. It was an Arlo camera on the front door of this police officer's home, number one. Number two is at that point, you would think that they would go there and procure that. Like, let's retain that camera. Let's look at the camera. But Lieutenant Gallagher said, I've seen that camera before because I've had to pick up packages for this officer. And I was like, I'm sorry, Lieutenant. Are you Amazon Part 2? Like a package gets delivered and then you're going and picking it up for your police officer. Great, that's fine. You don't want it to get stolen.
Mhm.
Now he's an expert at his camera angle.
Yeah. Well,
Why didn't they at least ask for it to see it?
and let's say that he didn't get the crime on camera, right? He didn't get Karen Reed hitting John O'Keefe. It can corroborate the times that Ryan Nagel says he drove off, the time that Karen Reed possibly drove off, what time Jen McCabe said she left.
Yes.
Any cars that had come and gone on that street, it should pick up on camera for the most
Right.
part. I mean, those things are not foolproof. Our cameras don't always pick up when someone just drives by. Who knows? However, we don't know what that camera might have
Right.
caught. Is there someone jogging down the street that might have tricked the camera off and you pick up a murder? But that
But that's as investigators, we understand that
that's the
because
job.
an investigation is not, it's the worst way that you can do an investigation is to focus only on the subject, which would be John O'Keefe and 34 Fairview.
Mhm.
Sometimes, in order to find your subject or find the answers to a crime or any type of investigation that you're trying to solve, you work from the outside in, the
Mhm.
outside being the street, further out, other cameras, who was
Any
coming from
camera
where, correct?
on that street was so pertinent to this
Talking to
investigation.
neighbors. They never
Absolutely.
scoured the neighborhood. They never spoke with
But
neighbors.
also, speaking of neighbors, let's take a rewind back because we remember that the Alberts slept through the commotion on their front
Yep.
lawn, that nobody ever went and knocked on their door, that they didn't know that this was happening. But the neighbor across the street, the neighboring police officer whose solo cups were used and whose camera was never collected from investigators, was up and awake during the time of this investigation, at the time of the crime scene, at the time that all of this happened. He was awake and he was there.
But he never actually, nobody, so the Commonwealth actually had asked Lieutenant Gallagher, did anybody, or and other witnesses too, did anybody ever come out of the neighboring homes across the street, down the street? I'm so sorry, but this is a police officer that lives across the street.
Hmm.
You've taken solo cups from them, and you're trying to tell me that they didn't come. It just screams part of the collusion too, as well. Like
But they
they,
said they never kept a log of who came on and off the crime scene, which that alone, you
right.
should absolutely know everybody who's entering that crime scene. Once it doesn't matter if it was a snowplow accident, it doesn't matter if John O'Keefe slipped and fell and bumped his head and died. That's a dead man on a lawn,
A dead man that's a police officer. One of
especially
their
that's a police
fellow
officer.
police officers, the man in blue, when an officer dies, especially in duty or out of duty, anything of that nature, there's other agencies that actually will honor them,
Hmm.
and they're not part of their unit or their
Yeah,
department. The
neighboring
lack
cities.
of respect for him, just even as a police officer, and some people, who was it that said, one of the witness had testified and said, we treat all people the same. I
Hmm.
understand that, but this is one of your fellow officers. The other thing is Lieutenant Gallagher used a leaf blower. That was one of the issues too, as well. So he said it was because he wanted to have more controlled environment in order to procure evidence. He did find pink blood spots, and he said as they got deeper, the blood became darker in color. So that's when he realized that they needed to collect the evidence, and that's when he went and somebody got the red Solo cups. It just shows the botch investigation from the beginning of this,
Hmm.
and why he would use a leaf blower, especially when the Massachusetts State Police Department was called out later that day, who took over the investigation. The Canton Police Department was then recused because Brian Albert's brother, Kevin Albert, is a current Canton Police Department. He's a current Canton police officer at the time of the incident, and then Brian Albert being a retired police officer as well. So when the Massachusetts State CERT team arrived later in the afternoon to do the investigation of the property at 34 Fairview, they actually used shovels because they were trying to dig for evidence through the snow. They did a more appropriate investigation.
Hmm.
They talked about when they did it as a grid. They just did it properly in the sense of how it was supposed to be initiated originally. And that is about the only credit that we'll give the Massachusetts State Police Department, is when they went out there, they did the grid. They had the officers stand shoulder to shoulder because of the small area that they had to investigate. The Canton Police Department did none of that.
Yeah.
And they left the scene open. They tried to put crime scene tape around it,
Hmm.
but then it was blowing around because of the wind. And they left it open until the Massachusetts State Police CERT team arrived later in the afternoon, like early evening, late afternoon, early evening,
Right.
like I think 4:46, somewhere right around there PM is when they arrived. So there was
So,
hours there
yeah.
where it was open. It's sad because this John deserves so much better than this. His family deserves so much better. And at the end of the day, Karen, while she's not a real likable defendant, she doesn't exude compassion and all of that, but at the same time,
Empathy.
she deserved better, because if she is innocent and she were to be framed, then it was not fair for her either.
Yeah. I completely agree, which that moves us into Sergeant Buchanan, which I feel like we have a lot to say about.
We could do 5 episodes.
I don't know how to say this. I don't want to be disrespectful, but watching Alan Jackson do cross examination with Sergeant Buchanan is like watching me fight with my toddler. That's what it feels like. Because
Yeah.
toddlers say the most outlandish, irrational things. They're just saying things to say things, and that's how it feels. Alan Jackson could ask this man, "Is my cup blue?" And Sergeant Buchanan would be like, "I don't know. Can you?"
Define
I was
blue.
gonna say, "Can you tell me the definition
Right.
of a cup? I don't understand." And it feels disrespectful to John. It feels disrespectful to John's family. It feels disrespectful to the jurors because there's a
Right.
point where this man is making a mockery of this trial. Because how are you going to say that's a theory? And then Alan Jackson says, right, which is essentially an assumption. And this guy goes, can you define theory? And Alan Jackson said, well, you used that word 40 seconds ago. And the guy said, he literally says, if you can get a dictionary and show me what theory means so I can understand it. And it just is, it's funny in the sense of, it's not ha ha funny. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, you literally watch it being like, are you kidding me? The other thing is he messed up evidence.
Mm-hmm.
He messed up evidence. So the Nike shoe, which everybody was
There's
sitting there.
already such a controversy around this Nike shoe. Did it
Right.
have a black sole? Is it a white sole? Is this tampered with evidence? And then this man,
Pulls out a shoe. So he brings the evidence with him. He testifies that he obtained John O'Keefe's shoe from the hospital when he went to go see his body. And there was clothing. So he procured his jeans, his shirt, his sweatshirt, and his right shoe. So he brings it with him, the evidence. Now, mind you, the day before, let's not forget that I believe it was Lieutenant Gallagher, could be wrong, but I think it was Lieutenant Gallagher who brought the left shoe because that was located at 34 Fairview, right? So we already saw the left shoe in testimony. Now Buchanan's like, okay, so he cuts open the bag and he pulls out this black Nike shoe and he's like posing it around so everybody can see, the jurors can see it. And then they ask him, like, what is this shoe? And he said, it's the left shoe from 34 Fairview. It's like, I'm so sorry, sir. We saw the left shoe yesterday. Now you're bringing us another left shoe when clearly it's a right shoe. So then he picks up the bag, the evidence bag, reads what it says, and he says, oh, I'm so sorry. It's the left shoe from 34 Fairview. Jackson says, can we approach? The judge literally had a gasp. Like, look at her.
It was so shocking to everybody.
We're like, I mean, are we like, we rest this case? We're done? Is this a mistrial?
At this point, let's call it a day. Judge Bev is immediately like, we're going to go ahead, take a sidebar, take a break. We're going to come back after lunch.
They did a recess and then they came back and they remade him do it again. So as if that had never happened.
It was like, scene.
Yes, literally. Okay, cut, action, go.
Let's do it again. And then the jury is going to have to forget that this man just said this is, as a juror, it's locked in. It's locked in. You could tell me, jurors disregard.
Which she did. She said, sometimes we just have to be really careful and make sure that all of our evidence is labeled accurately. The amount of times that she's had to apologize for stuff like that, her frustration.
Her talking about, she had to tell the jurors to disregard her bias towards the defense. Essentially, she said, jurors, I might get a little frustrated at the lawyers sometimes, but just disregard the only lawyers that you are upset with is the defense.
Right. And they see that. As I'm watching Buchanan's testimony, I'm thinking to myself, if I were a juror, they live in Massachusetts and they live near Canton, correct? These are the people that if something ever happens to you, these are the people that are going to investigate. This is who you have.
If you end up dead on somebody's lawn, just know these are your protect and serve.
And you hate to say it like that, but the truth of the matter is, I hope they're taking note that is this how you would want to be investigated? Are these the people that you would want representing you to find the person responsible for it? Because once again, the autopsy has an undetermined cause of death. And now we have just this wild show of nonsense.
Also, on a side note that I thought was relevant because it's Buchanan, when he's pulling out the evidence, he pulls out John's jeans and shows the back of them, and there's a ripped pocket. His back pocket is ripped. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, how does one get a ripped back pocket from being hit by a car and falling on your back? I am curious about that.
I think some people would think that maybe when he fell,
upon impact, it might have ripped it.
Right, ripped it on impact.
I mean, I've thought about it. I've thought about this for a couple of days.
What was your thought on the actual sweatshirt when they held that up in the big like plexiglass container? What were your thoughts when you saw it? Did you think it would be a little bit more? Because my thought process is the defense is trying to say that he was bit by a dog right on his arm. And it was hard to see through the screen because we weren't obviously there in person. So my my question is, what did it look like in person? Did it show a little bit more shredding? Because you would think that it would if he were bit by a dog. So that
Yeah.
was something that I was looking for.
But also, even if he wasn't bit by the dog, I feel like the shirt would still be torn up because of the lacerations that he has to his arm, that damage that looked like dog bites. It didn't matter if it was dog bites or if it came from the road. Don't you think that either way, the shirt would be shredded up regardless? Although you can tell kind of, I guess maybe a dog bite would be maybe more of a tear, but not necessarily. I mean, just because it punctures the shirt, it could tear the skin, but not
Right.
necessarily the shirt,
Right.
or it could. So I'm not really certain. I'd have to see it, I guess, in person to really
Yeah,
understand it.
I would think we'd have to see it in person because it was dark in color, the arms, so it's hard to see
Absolutely.
exactly the condition of what that looked
And
like.
it's just kind of dangling. And
Right. And then, of course, they showed the t-shirt too as well.
yeah.
I do think one of the most important things that Buchanan did talk about, well, actually, I'm sorry, the defense brought out of him because he didn't want to bring it up was the
Mhm.
fact that he called the medical examiner's office on January 29th at 10 like
41.
41
Yeah.
a.m. and let them know that it appeared that John O'Keefe had been hit in the face with a cocktail glass. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Very, very bad.
And where did that go? Why has that not been really a subject that has been raised prior? That I mean, I think that's a pretty
Because
big
they've all
deal.
been colluding up until now, and
Yeah.
is I think it's just
Yeah.
as they listen. If this is a hung jury, sorry, if this is a hung jury in a mistrial, they will not try this again. There is no way they
No, I
can.
think they will. I genuinely think that they will try it again.
I mean, what are your thoughts on Hank Brennan?
I think it's hard because when you have Hank Brennan in contrast with Alan Jackson, it goes from like, okay, okay, to like, ho, 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 ho. It's
Right.
when Alan Jackson is up there on the stand, especially in contrast to Brennan, he's very explosive, not in a bad way, but and I love when he says, we can sit here and do this all day. Because, especially with the Commonwealth, they've obviously been trained. They've obviously been instructed.
I love it. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I love it when he asks Buchanan, like, can you really say that this is that Michael Proctor, because Buchanan was Michael Proctor's supervisor. So
Mhm.
he says, can you say that Michael Proctor did like, you know, an honest,
Do you think that this investigation was done with honesty and integrity?
yeah, an
Is what he
honor? I
says.
think honor too
Honor,
was in there
integrity,
as
or
well.
something.
And he sits there and then he like long pause, like
And
10 seconds.
he's asked more than one time.
Right.
Do you think this investigation is done with honor and integrity? And he sits there, and then I believe there was an objection, and then Bev asks the question differently. Do you think that Michael Proctor handled this investigation with honor and integrity? And finally, he answers, and he's like, "Yeah, I believe that my because I think Alan Jackson says you don't want to say it. You don't
He
want to
won't say the
say."
thing is he won't say his name, and at one point, the silence is there, and then he looks at Alan Jackson, he said, Is this a question?" He says, "Everything I say is a question."
Yeah, he
Like,
goes, sorry, was that a question? He pauses. Oh, sorry, was that a question?
right, very, very
Everything I
cocky.
say is, yeah.
Mhm.
My favorite thing that there are two key points of yesterday's testimony that were my favorite. One was when he asked about the dictionary, and the second one was when he hands Buchanan this stack of text messages. It's 1,000 text messages, and Judge Bev looks at Alan Jackson. She goes, "Certainly you don't. Certainly you don't expect him to read all of those." And Alan Jackson says, "Yes, I
I
do intend
intend to.
to."
Mhm.
And I love it. And he's made him read every single one of those text messages.
One quick point on a side note, one thing when we're watching different cases is that attorneys will try and do tactics to showboat, right? They want to
Mhm.
make, oh, if I can be a good attorney, then I can distract. So sometimes, like, I think when I watch trials and I see an attorney trying to put on a good show, like what Alan Jackson is doing,
Mhm.
then is it a distraction to try and get people to buy into what
Mhm.
their narrative is
Of
and what they
course.
want people to believe that their client is innocent and they're not proven
Yeah.
guilty. Unfortunately, in this situation, Alan Jackson, while he is a good defense attorney on cross-examination, the evidence in itself and the witnesses in themselves speak volumes more than what him just showboating and being a good entertainer, because you have to be
Absolutely.
careful of that with these cases, because some of the dirtiest like attorneys and prosecutors have done that.
Yeah.
They try and create such a oh, we're going to do this and this, and it distracts from what we're really trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that is the case in this situation for sure.
Well, I think with as elusive and combative as especially the police department witnesses, any law enforcement witnesses have been, it's you. I mean, the material writes itself. I mean, just answer yes or no. And especially with Jen McCabe and especially with Sergeant Buchanan, it's not a yes or a no. It's what color is this glass? Or no, it's is this glass blue? And it's, well, I don't know. I don't know a color blue. Can you define? And it should just be a yes or no question,
It's
but
always the
they just
memory. I don't recall. I don't
mhm,
remember. But that's how
yeah.
they've been coached to do
And
that.
yeah, and that's going back to what I was saying is that
Mhm.
they all of the Commonwealth's witnesses have very heavily been coached and instructed to say, I don't remember, I don't recall. Maybe if you have a report, it could refresh my memory. Then
Well,
they read
except
the
for Jen
report.
McCabe, right? Remember, because she would like, do you have something that could refresh my memory? And then they would show it to her, and they're like, does this refresh your memory? And she's
She's
like,
like,
no,
no.
it
And
doesn't.
and even with Buchanan, you give him the report and Alan Jackson is saying, okay, well, does that refresh your memory? And he says, well, yeah, it's on the paper. So I guess, yeah. It's not, oh, yeah, I do remember that now. I do apologize. It's been some years. It's just everything it's like, oh, yeah, it's very frustrating to watch.
Yeah.
And he's so smug on the stand. And I think that is
Oh, his like
infuriating. His little smirk that he
smiles, his
does.
yes, his eye thing when he gets caught in something, he does this weird eye twitch thing, where he like looks back and forth, and then he does a
Mhm.
smirk. Just his body posture, his demeanor, the way
Yeah.
that he answers these questions,
Well,
it's
I would be embarrassed. I would not ever be so proud to be on the stand,
yeah,
being
yeah.
saying, doing the things that he's doing, saying the things that he is saying, knowing that my fellow officer died, and we're trying to allegedly get justice for him. This isn't a cover up where nobody's colluding. I
But
would
they're
be
in it so far, don't you think that at
there,
this
and it's
point
so deep.
they can't go backwards. They have nowhere
Absolutely.
to go but just like keep like diving in. And speaking of Michael Proctor really quick before we end this, because
Yeah.
the big question is Michael Proctor going to testify?
Right.
We have, and Brian Higgins, right?
And Brian
We
Higgins and Brian
have,
Albert.
and Brian Albert too. Yep.
Mhm.
We have Buchanan right now who is reading the text messages between Higgins and Karen Reed, which the last trial Higgins read them. So
Mhm.
it's starting to look like they're not going to testify, and they're
Mhm.
trying to lay the defense is trying to lay foundation, because remember, Higgins and Brian Albert is, they're trying to use them as third party culprits,
Yeah.
and they have to lay that foundation. And so
Right.
they're doing that through Buchanan. So now Buchanan is reading these text messages between Karen Reed and Higgins.
I think that it's important to lay out the reason why. But people are asking, are Michael Proctor or the Bryans going to be called to the stand? If the Commonwealth does not call them, there's a chance that the defense may not either. However, if the defense does call them as their witnesses, they have to do a direct examination. So it has to be open-ended questions.
Right.
It
It
can't
can't
be.
be.
It has to be. Did you go to 34 Fairview? And it's an open-ended question. It can't be, well, are you trying to tell me that you never went to 34 Fairview at this time and this time? And it can't be so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, they can't be yes or no questions
Yeah.
technically. I mean, there could be some open-ended questions would be more like with the Commonwealth, you see them saying, um, he'll ask, Brendan will usually ask, did you go to 34 Fairview? And they're like, yes. Well, what did you see when you arrived at 34 Fairview? So that's an open-ended question. So then
Mm-hmm.
they're basically walking them through the narrative of, well, then I arrived and then I walked here and then I saw this. Where if you look at Alan Jackson on cross, he's allowed to be more direct. Like, are you trying to tell me that you never put this item into evidence? Did you? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's, it's kind of more, it feels like more of like a vicious attack. But
Yeah.
and so that's the difference I think between the two, which makes it a little bit more challenging.
The
But if
questions have to be, it's a smaller pool of questions that can be asked to
just
those
the
witnesses.
format, I think is how
Absolutely.
they have to actually be asked. So the question is, do you think they're going to call the defense? Well, first of all, do you think the Commonwealth is going to call Michael Proctor, Brian Higgins, or Brian Albert?
There's word around town that Commonwealth is not going to call any of the Bryans or Michael Proctor. And I believe that's why the defense is laying this out with Buchanan right now. Do Do I feel like the defense may call them? I think if they're going to be called as a witness, I think it's going to be the defense. I think the Commonwealth knows that there's a really shark of a team with Karen Reed, and if they put these witnesses, especially with as shaky of testimony as Jen McCabe has been and Sergeant Buchanan, they know they're walking this very fine line, and I don't believe they want to put them through that cross examination with the defense because any small little detail is detrimental to this case.
I think it's going to be determined on how well the defense
Buchanan.
feels like
Yeah,
their position is at the time before they call them,
I
if they're
agree.
going to be needed. The other question people are talking about is if they think Karen Reed at this point will testify.
I don't think so.
I have never thought she was going to testify from the
I've
beginning.
never thought that she was going to testify. If you have a good attorney, they will always advise you to not testify. However, it is Karen Reed's decision at the end of the day if she wants to
Right. She can
testify.
decide if she wants
But
to or not.
I don't think she's going to testify. I mean, I think it would have to be the last ditch effort if something just absolutely groundbreaking came out and Karen said, I need to go defend my honor. But to be honest, I think the defense's case is very, very strong. And I don't think that putting Karen up on the stand is the right move. And I don't think she's going to testify.
One last quick question, real quick, and then I know we have to wrap this up. But so the jury did a view of 34 Fairview. So they went to the scene, the location, and they actually brought Karen's vehicle in the SUV. And I know we talked about this previously, so I won't go into depth about it. My question is there was a rock on the front lawn. And the judge actually had to tell the jurors when they got back from the viewing into the courtroom to disregard that rock because that rock was not there at the time. There was word, and I cannot confirm this, that the Albert's ALBERTZZZ was written on the front of the rock. There were some photos of that, but I have not been able to confirm that part was factual. What we do know the rock was there. Do you feel like the rock was placed there intentionally as a representation of John's body? And if so, who put that there? Because they no longer own the home. And then that means the homeowners would have had to been okay with that.
Or maybe
Very,
the homeowners didn't know. Maybe someone went out that morning and put it out there, and the homeowners didn't know that that rock was put out there.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
they've been advised that the court is coming by with a jury. Like they have to know all of this. It's disclosed during the sale of the home
No, no, no.
that
I'm saying that maybe the homeowners didn't know the rock was placed there.
no, I know that, but
Oh,
I'm just saying,
okay.
I think they know so much about this that
Yeah,
imagine backing out of their driveway and going to work in the morning, be like, "Wow, there's this random rock. Okay, that's fine." Like, or they did.
absolutely.
Well, then that would be the point to the Commonwealth. If they didn't see the rock, that's what nobody
That's
saw
true.
John's body. So,
Well, I don't think
I mean,
a rock is the same size of a 6'1"
no, but I
male.
just think it was an interesting aspect because it feels like it was purposeful. Like somebody put that there for a reason and it was kind of
Absolutely.
sending a message to the
Yeah.
jury. And then if you're a juror, do you disregard seeing that
I
rock?
would never disregard something they tell me to disregard.
I know you're supposed
Them
to,
playing
but
this when I go for jury duty, they're like, "Is this you saying you would never disregard?" Real quick, this is the last thing that I want to touch on, and then we can go ahead and wrap this up. Let's talk about the Sally Port
okay.
when they transported Karen's when they transported Karen's vehicle, and Sergeant Buchanan said that the vehicle didn't get there until closer to 5:30?
Yeah, it was like 5:30 when the vehicle got there, but it was the CERT team that they had arrived and had confirmed that that vehicle actually was at the Sally Port around like 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And they could have looked at it, but it was like 1.6 miles away from 34 Fairview, and they never went over to the Sally Port to look at it. But then Buchanan said it actually didn't get there until 5:30, and they went to look at that vehicle at 5:35 p.m., which is what 3 hours later than
Yeah.
it was originally said to have been there.
And that's important because if there's 3 hours, I mean, first of all, the Sally Port video just vanished. Weird enough.
And then was
Inverted.
inverted. Yep.
And then now the vehicle was MIA for 3 hours. We don't know where the vehicle went. And the vehicle is the alleged murder weapon,
Correct.
And they're saying that her taillight was cracked. They're saying that the cracked taillight feels like it was their smoking gun. But then this vehicle went MIA. That's like finding, if someone is shot, that's like finding the gun and then it just goes disappearing out of evidence for a couple of hours and then it shows up with some DNA of your suspect. and it is worrisome in that
It's
aspect.
the problem is the chain of custody. The chain of custody of all the evidence between the vehicle, John's clothing, how it was documented. Buchanan had said that he was at 34 Fairview on February 3rd, February 4th, where February 3rd the cocktail straw was located,
Right.
was found. February 4th, there was a tail light. He never wrote a report. He collected that evidence and then gave it to somebody that he doesn't remember.
He doesn't remember any of the reports that he wrote. He doesn't remember who he gave these reports that he didn't remember writing. He doesn't remember who he gave them
He
to.
didn't even write reports. He confirmed that he didn't even write reports
Yeah.
until no reports were written for February 3rd, February 5th, February 10th until November of 2023. Like well over a year later.
And again, the chain of custody is they didn't even block off the crime scene, you know. And the Sallyport video going missing. Now the shoe mix-up debacle.
He was called by, I believe it was, I don't think it was Lieutenant Gallagher. I cannot remember who it was that he was called by, but it was from the Canton Police Department. And oh gosh, I'm so sorry. The name is on top of my head. But anyway, he was a witness. So Buchanan was called by the Canton Police Department about the taillight that was found on February 3rd. I was like, hey, so I was driving by 34 Fairview. I didn't get out of my car, but I just so happened to find this little itty bitty red piece of taillight that I can see from my vehicle. Can you come by and pick it up? And that's how he was notified about the taillight. I just mind blown as I'm watching this. And
that was retired. Was it Gallagher?
I don't remember if it was Gallagher or not. I don't want to speak out of
witnesses.
context. Yes. So we'll look it up and confirm if you guys would like us to. I'm so sorry. But I mean, there's so many like lieutenant sergeants. I mean, a lot of people.
Lieutenant
So
Sergeant Major, ATP,
listen,
PTP.
the amount of times
Brian.
the amount of times that Alan Jackson has gotten people's names mixed up and he's like deep in this case. Like, okay, I'm like, I don't feel bad. I don't remember his name, but
John
still.
Albert, Brian Higgins. Yeah, it's just it's a lot of names, but
It is.
I believe that there's somebody that's going to crack at some point. Someone's going to crack.
Do you think it'll be Michael Proctor that he's going to turn? Because remember, he's been fired now as a Massachusetts State Police officer, detective for.
No, I think that a man's ego would never. I mean, he's and the way that Sergeant Buchanan is saying, "Oh, Michael Proctor is the best. Everybody is the best." I don't believe that Michael Proctor is going to flip because of the repercussions of perjury, the repercussions of death threats. I mean, I think that he would have to go in there and stand 10 toes down on his own testimony,
Unless he makes a deal.
Unless he makes a deal.
It'd have to be a sweet deal,
Let's
too.
make it a deal. I want to know everything.
I mean, it would be very interesting.
I want him to burn the whole house down. I want him to take everybody with him.
Because at the end of the day, what happened to John O'Keefe? That's really what the answers. If Karen Reed is found innocent by the jury, then we still don't know. Mm-hmm. That leaves so many unanswered questions. And his mom testified, which was so tactful for the defense. They just said, tasteful. We're so sorry for your loss. And they asked her no questions. And I was like,
it should be. They should have not asked her a single question. I would have looked at them if they were sitting up there berating this mother who's already lost 2 of her children.
And son-in-law.
Every time I see that woman, I imagine the pain that she has to live with. So I'm so glad they decided not to do that. But we have to go ahead and wrap this episode up.
Yes, we do.
We truly continue to go on. And we try and keep these episodes not too long. Truly, at this point, it feels like we're going to do 3 podcasts.
Had so much to say.
And we still do.
So much to say.
But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Definitely, we're going to try and go live soon.
We're going to do live soon, yes.
And we're trying to be more active on our socials. We're just trying to figure it all out. It's a journey.
We had a week last week that some unexpected emergencies came up, so we're so sorry, but we will definitely keep more active and on it. And
absolutely, we are coming back consistently. Life was just lifing, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate your support
very much. So thankful.
Let us know any comments, questions that you have. Comment them down below. Follow us on socials, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. We can't wait to come back with more Karen Reed updates, and hopefully we get some Michael Proctor, Brian, and some more Sergeant Buchanan testimony. And
we're definitely in more Buchanan.
Truly. So, all right.
Thanks, you.
Guys.
Bye.